Let me start off for a brief introduction for listeners that are not familiar with the Jordan Codices. Could you please inform us what the Jordan Codices are?
Yeah, around about 10 years ago, a series of upwards of 70 ring-bound books made entirely of lead, impure lead, were discovered in caves in northern Jordan. And there's strong evidence that shows that they date back to the 1st and 2nd centuries. And analysis of the language has demonstrated they are probably the only Hebrew Christian documents in existence. In other words, they are the documents of the church in its earliest form. And when we announced them in 2011 on the BBC, they created an immense furore, with scholars arguing for and against them. And of course, it's a debate that still continues. But recent tests conducted at the University of Surrey's state-of-the-art Iron Beam Centre have finally proved the authenticity and the antiquity of the documents. So, it's almost argument over.
So you've got these documents, and why is this so important? What is so explosive that's held in this in these tablets, in these codices that seem to be unnerving so many people?
Well, that's the question. The people who are against them seem to have gone on the defensive without actually inquiring to us, what they contain and what they mean. Not once from any of these people have we received any requests for data or information regarding the codices. They've immediately gone on the attack. They've immediately, therefore, gone on the defensive. And that's a very curious thing. And this is what, has baffled us, to be honest with you. It's I would suggest a lot of it is just the usual academic infighting. And I'm afraid to say we have another Dead Sea Scrolls situation. The scrolls, when they were discovered, went through the same infighting, willful misunderstanding, the same defensive reactions. And of course, this led to them being suppressed for, 47, 50 years? It's a pretty shocking situation.
We've got about 5 minutes left here, 4 to 5 minutes left. I want to kind of get a little bit of an update. Can you tell us, during your recent trip to Jordan, I understand you were under house arrest for a month. What was that for?
Yes, I was illegally detained, and in February, 6 years since our last trip to brief the Department of Antiquities on the discovery, we were invited to Jordan by Jordan Heritage, which is a non-governmental organization, to publicize the codices to a largely unaware public. And the trip started off really well. It was a great success. We were on national TV, we were on English-speaking radio, we were in the national press, and we were then invited by a number of Jordanian universities and also the Levant Christian Organization to give lectures. Now, that's a big organization that represents all the churches in the region. But however, halfway through the campaign, on the orders of Munta Jamhawi, the director of the Department of Antiquities, the universities were forced to cancel my lectures, and they then threatened to shut down Jordan Heritage if they had anything more to do with us or with the codices, and thus we were left on our own. And this is quite an extraordinary situation. But however, fortunately, I was able to give a lecture at Yarmouk University, which happened before any of this occurred and before it could be cancelled. I was able to give a good presentation on the analysis conducted by Professor Roger Webb and Matthew Hood at the Iron Beam Centre at the University of Surrey. And it was a very well-attended lecture with students and professors of the faculties of science and archaeology. And they were fascinated by what I had to say, especially as the evidence completely contradicted what they had been told by the Department of Antiquities and one of its staff scholars, Dr. Omar Houl, that the codices were all fakes. So there's a big campaign here to, even in the face of the evidence, to deny that the codices are actually real. And even in the face of this hard evidence, Dr. Houl, who attended the lecture, could not accept the results and actually stormed out of the lecture room. We've just found it a very odd behavior indeed.
Well, why? But if you've got this, right, this isn't like some fly-by-night organization you've worked from. You've got some science behind this. Why would he be so invested in trying to suppress the codices? When you've got the Jordanian people who received the discovery with excitement and enthusiasm.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, following the lecture at Yarmouk, I was ordered through our hosts to actually appear for an interview at the Department of Antiquities. Well, the interview turned into an interrogation, and it was a far cry from 6 years ago when I'd been invited there by Professor Ziad Al-Saad, who was a very, very distinguished archaeometallurgist, and who had been subsequently sacked for having supported the codices when he'd had them tested at both the Royal Scientific Society and the Atomic Energy Commission, and had shown them to be actually authentic. Unfortunately, Munta Jamhawi, the new director, couldn't have been more different from Professor Al-Saad, who himself is a deeply honourable man of integrity and high incompetence, high competence, I should say. And I have to say that Director Jamhawi's attitude and the things he said to me were really very, very baffling. But as I say, fortunately, I tape recorded the entire conversation, or I should say, interrogation at the Department of Antiquities. And
well, let's cover that. We have to go to break. Let's talk about, and I want you to kind of talk me through this interrogation and what you had to go through to get that information. David Elkington, my guest, and we are talking about the Jordan codices and the strange events that happened to our guest recently. You were talking about being detained there. What was going on? Who's behind this this whole folly?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, we have to sort of kind of look at all of this. I mean, we think that the real opposition has come from fundamentalist Christian scholars and organizations and those associated with them who dominate archaeology and heritage in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. What was that interrogation like then? I'm sorry, I was just going to say, what was the interrogation like? I mean, how are they coming at you then?
I walked into the room, and there were about 7 or 8 of them immediately, and I was kind of sat down in a circle. They were in a circle around me, and before there were any niceties, whatever, I was accused of actually withholding an antiquity from them. I was told that I had held the codex that we had been given in 2011 by the Department of Antiquities on temporary loan. I was told that we had it illegally. Now, I said to them, well, look, we had this for analysis. It was agreed we would take it back to the UK for it to be analysed. And yes, they said, but everything that I had done is illegal. And I should have returned it, 5 years prior to that. And I said, well, actually, we tried to do that. We tried to actually have it returned. We got in touch with you, but nobody responded. And of course, this just got worse and worse. And then, as the interview went on, and as I became more aware, it became more of an interrogation. The director of Antiquities looked at me and said, "You will be silenced." And I was completely horrified by this, but smiled at him. And he drew his finger across his neck as if to say, "If you're not silenced, things will happen." And it was really quite extraordinary. I've never come across anything like it.
And this is the Department of Antiquities?
From the Department of Antiquities, would you believe it? The director himself, Munta Jamhawi, insisted that all of the codices were fake. Yet when I asked him if they'd had them tested, no, nothing at all. They've done no testing, no analysis, and yet they say every single one that they have is fake. They turned down the University of Surrey's offer to conduct more tests, which are actually very expensive, and we've undertaken a lot of those costs ourselves. And they said that we should just stop immediately, that we had no permission to actually publish anything on the codices, even information that had nothing to do with them.
Okay, well, wait, one second. What's making no sense is, in one sense, they are saying that these are frauds, they're fakes, they're not real. Then why are they so adamant about wanting them back and saying it's a crime? If they're fake antiques, it should have no bearing to them if they're out there.
Well, this is what's so extraordinary, Dave. Right. It's just, you think, well, hang on a minute, if they're fakes, why are you so passionate in your pursuit of them? We, in the meantime, arranged to try to have a codex delivered to the embassy in London so that it could be returned. But the embassy in London, the Jordanian embassy, refused to take it unless the Jordanian Department of Antiquities would affirm that it actually is authentic, which of course they wouldn't do. So we couldn't win either way. And it was just extraordinary. And the threats to silence me and all of that, I thought, well, hang on a minute, what is going on here? Why? Why this sudden want to suppress everything about the codices, even in the light of the fact that before we went to Jordan, we had actually been in the world's press. We've been everywhere, with the exception of parts of America and Jordan, which, the only people to actually do an article on the authenticity of the codices in America were yourselves when we discussed this back in December. So yes, it's a very, very interesting story. But I've got to say that the hostage situation had a silver lining, because I was able to meet undercover with some very prominent political and judicial figures with whom I was able to share the story and also the analysis of the codices. And they were quite horrified, not only by my current situation, but by what had been done to us over the years by the opposition based in Jordan. So in the end, we achieved what we set out to achieve, and the Jordanian people are now aware and very excited about a discovery that validates their heritage. And we were able to make some very powerful allies, including Yarmouk University, who want to carry on working with us. But also, I think the other thing that excites the Jordanians, who, by the way, I have to say, Jordan is the friendliest country on the planet. They are a wonderful, wonderful people, and it's a fantastic place to go to. But it is such a terrible pity that they are let down so badly by those who are representing their cultural heritage. It's such an awful shame.
Now, you had said that you went in there and you had the foresight to take a tape recorder. Did they realize that you were recording this entire interrogation?
No, they didn't. But I felt that at the time to ask their permission would have been retroactive, to put it mildly. So I thought, no, I'll just keep the tape recorder in my pocket, and it'll be my insurance just in case anything can happen. Because
I thought when I was reading some of the information on the press release as well that they also threatened to bomb the Jordan Museum.
Yes, the director of the Department of Antiquities, Musa Jamhawi, actually states quite clearly, and we will be posting a transcript of this on the Jordan Codices community Facebook page. He threatened to send in the tanks and bomb the Jordan Museum. Now, I cannot think what spurred him on to saying something so inappropriate and totally unconnected to the Codices project. He must have been out of his mind to make such a distasteful reference. And all I can assume is that the pressure of being a director, when during his tenure there have been 3 major robberies at 3 major Jordan museums, must really be getting to him. Because we have, one robbery involved the theft of over 500 gold coins from one of the major museums. We have a robbery at the Aqaba Museum, but more interestingly, there was actually a robbery of codices from a Department of Antiquities storage vault in 2015, and that is absolutely horrifying. So I don't understand what's going on here. I just find it quite baffling.
Help us
assume that it must be those who are behind them.
Help us understand a little bit more. What is so explosive in these codices? I mean, what is it for those of us lay people that would read it and get the translation? What is so off-putting, or to the Jordan people, that would make it so important to them that that they're trying to deny and suppress this information?
Well, it's quite curious, because throughout Jordan, people are actually viewing them in a really positive light, because, of course, we're talking here about the potential of the unity of the 3 great religions, which is very exciting for them, because there are peaceable people who want to actually help in the process of more understanding, not giving out less. But I guess that if you look at it from the fundamentalist point of view, what you're looking at here is basically, a group of codices that are made of lead. They're sealed. The central one is, as we know, has a portrait on its front cover, which we believe to be that of Jesus Christ. It's very small, and we think it might well be the book that's mentioned in Revelation 5, where Jesus is to be seen in a vision opening a small sealed book. Now, I suspect that actually is suddenly appearing historically as a physical artifact has probably induced quite a bit of fear in terms of, well, now that we've got it, what will it say? Will it reveal something that perhaps goes against the fundamentalist ideology? Is it something that will actually be a downer on Christianity? I can immediately turn around and say that I doubt very much that that will be the case. I think these books confirm an awful lot of what Christianity says. They confirm an awful lot of what the Gospels say. Obviously, there are going to be differences, perhaps, in the historical analysis, because the Bible has been edited for, many times over the past 2,000 years or so. So suddenly we go back to the original source document, things are going to look a bit different. So perhaps that's what they're afraid of. I've no idea. We must find out more.
All right. So in looking at who's behind all of this, you think that the real opposition is coming from the fundamentalist Christian scholars and the organizations that are associated with this, right?
The American Center for Oriental Research, ACOR, has had a presence in the Middle East since the 1960s, and they've been controlling archaeological digs there ever since, and I mean across the entire region. They decide what the public know about and what gets suppressed, and what is displayed and what is sold off to private collectors. And it was ACOR Director Barbara Porter, supported by Christopher Tuttle, now Executive Director of the Council of American Overseas Research Centers, who in 2012, at the World Heritage Conference in Amman, and again in 2013 at the 12th International Conference on the History and Archaeology of Jordan at Humboldt University in Berlin, who put a stop to public announcements being made about the codices by a very, very prominent Jordanian public figure. The invitations that were sent out to Jennifer and myself and the team of scholars working on the codices were actually rescinded. And we also received threats from Mr. Tuttle subsequent to this. And we have to say also that two of the most fervent bloggers against the codices are Dr. Robert Cargill from the University of Iowa and Dr. Jim West of Quartz Hill School of Theology, both of whom are media officers for ACOR. And moreover, we've been told by an IT expert that all domain names, using Jordan-led codices as words, have actually been brought up by Dr. Cargill. Now, why would somebody go to such an effort to discredit the codices by buying up all of the websites associated with the names of those objects? It's obviously very costly to buy up all those domain names. So, it seems to me that he cannot have been acting alone. And we believe, therefore, that ACOR is also behind the reason why there's been almost no media coverage in the USA on the codices. Even though that we've had, massive coverage in Britain, Europe, Asia, and the Far East and Australia. And we even have some universities in the UK even that are supporting the suppression. One eminent professor who was working on the codices was threatened by his university, the University of Durham, with losing his pension if he had anything more to do with the codices or if he was to show up at the conference at the University of Humboldt in 2013. So it's threatening activity like this, which is why serious scholars are reluctant to get involved, because, of course, they don't want their names besmirched, that they don't want, the threat of losing their careers. So, what we have here is a situation where ACOR, having appointed themselves the overseers of all archaeology in Jordan and the region, are even taking charge of who is hired for positions within the Department of Antiquities. So we just struggle to understand why the Jordanians put up with this, as they represent some of the best scholarship in the world and are highly educated and very clever people. And all I can say is that Jennifer and I and some of the scholars on the Jordan Codices team urge them to stand up against what, frankly, is an oppression of their country, of their people, and of their cultural heritage. They deserve a hell of a lot better. And we need more understanding at the moment, not less. It's knowledge that's going to help us in the battle against extremism. Ignorance will only aid it.
When you were detained there, first of all, how can they detain you for such an extended period of time, and under what law were they able to quote and sustain this detention?
Well, that's the whole thing. The entire detention was illegal. A bribe was paid to the Ministry of the Interior. We know this on fact. And basically, a block was put on me from leaving the country at airports and ports, down south at Aqaba. And obviously, a search was on the borders as well for my name if it should have appeared. It was totally illegal, and I will actually be pursuing it legally with the Jordanian government in the months to come. But there was nothing I could do about it. Even though a bribe had been paid, there was nothing I could do about it. I had to actually stay there until the codex that we had in our temporary possession was returned. And in fact, we had to outlay a huge amount of money to make sure that it was returned and was returned personally by a courier. And of course, this is the other thing as well, is that the codex, when finally it was brought back to Queen Alia Airport in Amman, was actually sealed by customs there. What is curious is that there is a very notorious dealer who is probably the major player behind this campaign. And we made a breakthrough in discovering who it was a few weeks ago. He's the infamous Salem Al-Stafat. He's an antiquities dealer who is still operating an ancient coin business called Holy Land Numismatics, which is based in Bloomfield in Michigan. And what was surprising was how carelessly he gave himself away and his cohorts away, not only by making negative comments on our Facebook posts of our trip, but by publicly revealing that he knew all about our confidential dealings with the Department of Antiquities. Now, if that's the case, how did he know that the bag had been sealed at the airport? How did he know what our movements were to and fro the apartment where I was staying? How did he know about the interrogation? This information can only have come from the Director of Antiquities himself, Munta Jamhari. And I have to say, it's a testimony to basically how corrupt these people are. And we have to be very, very careful here. The codices are under extraordinary threat, and this campaign of suppression is getting more and more fierce as time goes on. And I have to say, I fear for the hoard. I fear for the discovery. I fear even for the archaeological sites where we took the Department of Antiquities in 2011. And they, at the time, congratulated us on what they thought was an extraordinary place, an extraordinary site, with some very intact caverns and other aspects that have never been seen before. Yet, when we got back to the UK in June of that year, and Professor Ziad Al-Saad had been removed from his post in that same period, the Department of Antiquities were ordered by those from above to actually rewrite their report into that site to say that there was nothing of any value ever found there, that in fact it had no value at all to archaeology or to archaeologists. So you can see that this is a very, very concerted campaign. It's very, very worrying.
It definitely sounds like that. We've got more to cover, and we'll take some of your calls in the next hour. If you have questions for our guest, David Elkington, about this discovery and what is going on with these codices. We'll also find out a little bit more about what happened since their return to the United States, not to the United States, but after returning from Jordan. We'll talk about that and so much more.
You possess the power to impact the global narrative and to be part of the history. Please share this report, and to be the first to see more videos like this, click the subscribe link below. Thank you for watching History Repeats Itself.